Cue the drum roll of destiny, dear viewer, as the Wars of the Roses fade and the House of York basks in shaky sunshine. Into this uneasy calm limps Richard, Duke of Gloucester, a man with a crooked spine, a sharper wit, and an even sharper appetite for power. He greets the newfound peace like a spider greeting a fly, proclaiming that since he cannot caper in love he will excel in villainy. His soliloquy, dripping with charm and acid, warns us the winter of our discontent will be remade into summer by the heat of his schemes. Richard isn't merely ambitious, he is the embodiment of Machiavellian hustle wrapped in black velvet and a sardonic grin. Instantly he resolves to eliminate every obstacle between himself and the crown, brothers included. The court celebrations echo in the background while his private ambitions drum louder. Our stage is set, and Richard flashes that toothy, knowing smile you can practically hear. Richard's first pawn is poor George, Duke of Clarence, big brother and convenient stepping stone. With silken words he whispers poisonous rumors to King Edward IV, convincing the frail monarch that Clarence will betray them. The order of arrest is sealed faster than you can say, off with his head, and Clarence marches off to the Tower still puzzled by his brother's sudden tenderness. Richard, ever the dutiful sibling, escorts him with crocodile tears and a smile tucked beneath his hood. Meanwhile, Queen Elizabeth and her Woodville kin sense a storm brewing, though they cannot yet trace the lightning to Richard's black cloud. Clarence, dreaming of barrels of Malmsey wine, doesn't realize one may double as his watery coffin. Richard privately jokes that sometimes justice truly is served on the rocks. By day's end, Clarence's fate is as sealed as that warrant. In the Tower, Clarence endures a nightmare worthy of a Gothic podcast. He dreams of drowning, gold-laden, while his brother's ghostly voice whispers betrayal. Two assassins arrive, bearing wine and daggers in equal measure, and the once mighty Duke is dispatched in that infamous butt of Malmsey. Shakespeare lets the liquid swirl like guilt itself, sweet, intoxicating, and deadly. One killer remorsefully wonders if devils wear friendly faces, but gold wins the argument. Somewhere, Richard toasts to family matters with ironic vintage. News of Clarence's death rocks the court, but Edward's health rocks harder, grief gnaws at the king's weakened heart. Richard, wiping an imaginary tear, publicly decries the tragedy he engineered. Such is the villain's craft, he sells poison, buys sympathy. Not content with fratricide, Richard crashes Henry VI's funeral procession, where Lady Anne weeps beside her father-in-law's bier. In a scene that would make any dating coach twitch, Richard woos her over a corpse, a pick-up line laced with bloodshed and flattery. Anne, reviled yet hypnotized, falters between grief and amazement at his audacity. Richard offers his sword, daring her to stab him if she truly hates him, then confesses love with gallows humor. Whether by shock, self-loathing, or dark charisma, she accepts his ring, sealing their grim engagement. Viewers at home, wipe that dropped jaw, this is romance by Shakespearean standards. Richard exits triumphant, dragging both coffin and bride toward his rising star. The moral? Never underestimate a strategist with nothing to lose. Back at court, King Edward IV's health wanes like a candle in a draught, while his queen scrambles to fortify their children's futures. Richard plays caring uncle, slithering through family feuds to widen each crack. He reconciles warring nobles in the king's presence, ensuring Edward believes the realm is finally at peace. Once Edward collapses forever, those cracks become chasms, and Richard knows every handhold. The widowed queen seeks sanctuary for her younger son, Richard of York, suspecting Gloucester's charm hides teeth. Yet Richard, newly made Lord Protector, convinces everyone, save the sharp-eyed few, that he's the answer to stability. Dear viewers, when the fox offers to guard the henhouse, count your chickens, quickly. The Crown Prince, young Edward V, travels south to coronation blissfully unaware that his uncle is steering the carriage into a spider's web. Richard and the ever-loyal Duke of Buckingham intercept the boy, assuring him their escort doubles as protection. Rivers, Grey, and Vaughan, defenders of the Woodville interest, are seized, their fates postponed in chains. Richard's political chessboard clears with ruthless efficiency. Meanwhile, the common folk whisper, sensing the wind shift though banners still flutter Yorkist white. Buckingham, hungry for promised rewards, follows Richard's lead like a shark drawn by blood-tinged current. Left isolated, the Queen's allies cannot stop the approaching tide. Our villain smiles, the tower's spare rooms await new tenants. Once the royal heir lodges inside the tower, for his own safety, of course, Richard turns his attention to Hastings, loyal to Edward's memory but suspicious of Gloucester's meteoric ascent. At council, Richard arrives with a withered arm theatrically exposed, accusing Queen Elizabeth's allies of sorcery. Hastings laughs at the absurdity, not knowing jokes cost heads in this regime. Guards swarm, Hastings is dragged away mid-breakfast, and before his tea cools he's beheaded on Tower Green. Such haste terrifies other nobles, humour is dead, and so might they be by supper. Richard uses the severed head as proof of a foiled conspiracy, consolidating fear as policy. Buckingham nods, counting favours owed. With opposition silenced, Richard and Buckingham stage a master class in propaganda. A priest preaches that King Edward's children are illegitimate, product of a secret pre-contract. Londoners, primed by rumour, mutter into their ale. Buckingham then parades through Guildhall, theatrically begging Richard to accept the crown, for England's sake. Richard, cloaked in faux humility, hides behind pillars before, reluctantly, accepting. It's political theatre so over the top you'd expect jesters, but the city buys tickets anyway. The princes, peering from tower windows, fade from public concern like erased sketches. Buckingham awaits his payday, unaware Richard's gratitude has an expiration date. Viewers, cue ominous violins. Now crowned Richard III, our anti-hero dons ermine and steel like a dragon wearing silk. Lady Anne receives a queen's coronet but not the affection to match, her health wilts under palace gloom. Rumours hint Richard intends to marry his own niece, Elizabeth of York, once and conveniently expires. Poison seeps through goblets and gossip alike, and soon and lies cold, casualty of dynastic calculus. Richard feigns grief for an audience that's long stopped clapping. Symbolically, the empty throne beside him shows power's loneliness, even tyrants need seatmates. He courts Elizabeth with unsettling speed, while her mother recoils in sanctuary. It's official, moral lines have not just blurred, they've been redrawn in sulphurous ink. Meanwhile, loyalists gather across the Channel under Henry Tudor, Earl of Richmond, last Lancastrian hope. Stanley, stepfather to Richmond and ostensibly Richard's ally, plays double agent with Oscar-worthy subtlety. Messages fly like carrier pigeons in overdrive, plotting rebellion timed to the king's unpopularity. Buckingham, denied promised lands, revolts prematurely, only to be washed away by storm and betrayal, a cautionary tale about reading fine print. Richard executes him, shrugging off another burned bridge. At this point, he's building a kingdom of ashes. The realm, however, now smells the smoke. Richmond lands in Wales, his banner a beacon for the disillusioned. The stage contracts for its final duel of dynasties. On the eve of Bosworth, Richard's tent is a haunted house. Ghosts of Clarence, the princes, Hastings, Lady Anne, Buckingham, and more drift in spectral procession. Each phantom blesses Richmond and curses Richard, turning the king's bed into a confessional box. Sleep refuses him, while across the field Richmond dreams of victory warmed by those same blessings. Conscience, long banished, returns to scratch at Richard's armor, and for once he looks genuinely rattled. Yet morning finds him defiant, vowing to prove a villain to the last. Even villains, it seems, dread the receipts of their crimes. As dawn bleeds over misty fields, two banners flap like pages of fate about to be written. Bosworth unfolds as thunderous ballet. Richard, lion-hearted despite his sins, charges like a battering ram, unhorsing knights with feral energy. He spots Richmond across the melee and spurs straight toward him, carving a path of steel. But Stanley's forces, switching jerseys mid-match, slam shut like jaws, isolating the king. Richard's horse is slain, prompting the iconic cry, "A horse! A horse! My kingdom for a horse!" A bargain no one will honor. Surrounded, he fights on foot, blooded crown dented yet still dazzling. The once invincible spider is tangled in his own web, every strand snapping. At last, Richmond's blade ends the tyrant's frantic dance. Richard's corpse is hauled ignominiously to Leicester, crown handed to Richmond like a relay baton of history. The new king, Henry VII, wastes no time pledging marriage to Elizabeth of York, stitching together red and white roses into Tudor unity. Peace suddenly seems plausible, though no one forgets how easily roses sprout thorns. The prince's fate remains whispered, a shadow darkening every corridor. Yet citizens exhale, relieved the stage villain has bowed out. For Shakespeare, the tragedy morphs into political origin story, from blood springs legitimacy. Richmond's closing speech calls for healing, but you may detect tremors of future plots beneath polite applause. Remember, viewers, in monarchy, sequels come standard. Themes blossom like ragged roses through the carnage. Power, sought without conscience, corrodes the seeker faster than any sword. Appearance versus reality struts on stage, embodied by Richard's courtly smile masking ice-cold calculations. Propaganda's might is showcased long before social media. Sermons, rumors, and staged humility become lethal weapons. Fate and free will duke it out, ghosts argue conscience still matters, even to villains who denied possessing one. Family loyalty is butchered on a political altar, its blood sealing shaky alliances. And amid all the treachery, the innocent princes symbolize fragile hope snuffed by unchecked ambition. Shakespeare whispers, governments may change, but human hunger for power rarely diets. Symbolism drapes every scene like velvet curtains. Richard's twisted body mirrors his moral contortion, challenging the era's obsession without a form reflecting inner worth. The tower stands as both fortress and mausoleum, safety that kills, sanctuary that imprisons, truth wrapped in stone. Nightmares, from Clarence's drowning dream to Richard's ghostly vigil, manifest guilt that rhetoric cannot drown. The persistent motif of blood, spilled, inherited, denied, threads lineage and violence together. Even animal imagery prowls, Richard a boar, Richmond a noble eagle, prey and predator trading roles by curtain fall. Mirrors, literal and figurative, glare at characters, daring them to recognize themselves. Spoiler, most avert their gaze. From a modern lens, Richard III feels eerily familiar. Spin doctors, smear campaigns, and courtroom theatrics thrive centuries before 24-hour news. The play warns how easily crowds can be swayed by confidence and a good soundbite. Buckled up with institutions too fragile to question charismatic authority, and you have a recipe still simmering today. Shakespeare's genius lies in making us complicit. We watch Richard's charm and almost root for him, catching ourselves too late. That guilt, our laughter at his quips, our awe at his nerve, mirrors the realm's seduction. The bard holds up a handheld mirror to every spectator. Would you notice the spider before feeling silk on your throat? History suggests, maybe not. For all his villainy, Richard remains oddly human, a study in insecurity weaponized. Born deformed in a beauty-obsessed court, he mortgages empathy to buy control, choosing fear over rejection. Shakespeare lets us glimpse the wounded child inside the tyrant, flickering like a candle before wind. Yet pity never absolves, sympathy wrestles revulsion, reminding us complexity doesn't equal exoneration. The duality births enduring fascination. We despise him, but lean in closer. Perhaps that's the scariest part, monsters often echo our own fractured reflections. Keep that in mind the next time charm knocks at your door. Shakespeare also toys with providence, divine justice emerging when earthly courts collapse. Clarence's dream of heaven rejecting him, Margaret's venomous curses coming true, ghostly visitations pre-battle, each thread knots destiny's tapestry. Yet free will isn't absolved, Richard chooses every sin, even as doom advances. The play's cosmology cheers poetic justice but warns it may arrive late, interest compounded. Tudor propaganda underscores that heaven favored Henry VII, though history students may grin at the irony. Still, the moral thunderclap lands, power devoid of virtue invites cosmic audit. Audit complete, kingdom confiscated. By curtains fall, we stand amid rubble of trust, kinship, and truth, yet hope sprouts from unlikely soil. Richmond and Elizabeth's union promises reconciliation, the red and white Tudor rose an emblem of blended wounds. It's a historical marketing campaign, sure, but also a reminder that peace sometimes requires marrying your narrative to your rivals. The audience exits pondering how many ghosts lurk behind every throne. Shakespeare doesn't gift wrap answers, he leaves flavorful ambiguity to stew. And that, dear viewer, is why the play remains binge-worthy after 5 centuries. So, what have we learned on this merry march through manipulation? That charisma without conscience is a loaded dice game, thrilling to watch, ruinous to play. That truth, bent artfully enough, becomes a weapon sharper than swords. That history's villains wear crowns forged by the silence of their victims. Above all, Richard III invites us to check the mirror for our own lurking appetites. Keep that wit sharpened and your skepticism sharper, for modern courts still echo with Shakespeare's warnings. Until next time, fellow travelers, guard your throne, whatever shape it takes, and mind the smiling spider. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this summary. This will help us continue to create content for future viewers. See you in the next video.